Hi, I'm Mark from eReplacementParts.com. In this video, I'm going to show you how to maintain your handheld leaf blower. As with all of your outdoor power equipment, your leaf blower will require some periodic maintenance to keep it running good. You'll want to perform this maintenance about once a year. The basic maintenance on your leaf blower will include replacing the spark plug, the air filter, and the fuel filter. As the amount of ethanol in our gasoline keeps increasing, at some point you'll probably need to rebuild your carburetor as well. We'll go ahead and get started by first removing the old spark plug. Now I'll use my scrunch to remove the plug, and I'll just unscrew the spark plug away from the motor. Now I can go ahead and install the new plug. Before I do though, I'll want to gap it to the correct gap. In this case, 0.7 of a millimeter. There we go. Now I'll just thread it in place. And tighten it down with the scrunch. And now I'll just replace the spark plug boot. Now we can move on to the fuel filter. I'll remove the fuel cap and use a piece of wire that I've bent into a hook to fish the fuel filter and fuel line out of the tank. Now with the help of a screwdriver, I'll remove the old filter. And now I'll just press the new fuel filter onto the line and drop it back down into the tank. Now we'll move on to cleaning and rebuilding the carburetor. First, I need to remove the carburetor from the blower. There's two screws that hold the carburetor assembly to the engine, and I'll remove those. With the carburetor loose, now I can go ahead and clamp off the incoming fuel line and go ahead and remove both fuel lines from the carburetor. And now I'll remove the throttle cable. Now I can start rebuilding the carburetor. But before I start taking it apart, I want to get some of this dirt off of it so I don't transfer that dirt back into the carburetor. And I'll just use some carburetor cleaner to do that. Now I'll press the primer bulb a few times to get any remaining fuel out of the carburetor. Now I'll start disassembling the carburetor. The key here is to stay organized as you do this. I'm starting with the diaphragm side of the carburetor. I'll remove the two screws that hold the plate over the top of the diaphragm. Now I'll remove the plate and set it aside on my rag. I'll keep the parts in order on the rag that they come off of the carburetor. So when I go to replace them, I just work in the reverse order. There's the diaphragm and the diaphragm gasket. Now we have access to the metering needle. That's held in place with a single screw. I'll remove that screw now. I want to keep a finger on the metering needle because there's a spring behind it. And when I remove this screw, that spring can get lost. So I'll slowly remove the needle and take the spring and set it aside. Now I'll move to the primer bulb side of the carburetor. I'll remove the 4 screws that hold this assembly together. Now again, I'll pull the assembly apart and set it aside in the same order that it comes apart. Here I have the reed valves. Pull those away, and the valve gasket. Now I'll go ahead and remove the throttle body from the carburetor body. It's held in place with 3 screws. And the throttle body simply pulls away from the carburetor. Beneath the throttle body inside the carburetor, there's a small roller that the throttle rotates on. I'll go ahead and remove that. Now you need to go ahead and clean all the small passages inside the carburetor body. You can do that using carburetor cleaner and even a little piece of fishing line that you can thread through the small openings. Never use metal to clean, however, as that will damage the carburetor. If you're lucky enough to have an ultrasonic cleaner in your shop like I have, you can use it to clean the carburetor. In fact, the ultrasonic cleaner can actually do a better job of cleaning than the carburetor cleaner. So I'll set the carburetor body, the throttle body, and the valve plate into the cleaner. I'll go ahead and set it for its maximum time and turn it on. Okay, the ultrasonic is finished. Now I can go ahead and pull the parts out, and I'll take them to my compressor and use a little compressed air to get the excess water off. Alright, now that we have everything clean, we can go ahead and start rebuilding the carb. I'll dump out all the parts in my carb kit. And what I like to do is just go on my rag and replace new parts for old parts in the same order that I removed them from the carburetor. The first part I'll replace in the carburetor is this little debris screen. I'll use a small screwdriver to slide the old one out of the carburetor body and then insert the new screen. I found that a pencil eraser works great to slide the new screen into place. Now we'll go ahead and replace the throttle body. I'll start by replacing that little round bearing we talked about that the throttle rides on. And now I'll just insert the throttle body back into place. And replace the screws. Now I'll move on to the valve portion of the carburetor. I'll replace the reed valve, the valve gasket, the valve body, and the body's held in place with a screw. While I have the carburetor torn down, I'll also go ahead and replace the primer bulb. And secure the primer bulb with the 4 screws. Now we'll move to the diaphragm side of the carburetor. First, we'll replace the needle. I like to take the needle lifting lever and assemble it first with the post, and then I'll slide the needle onto the lever and hold all that as an assembly. Now back on the carburetor, I place the spring to the carburetor body and drop the whole needle assembly down onto it. It can take a couple of tries sometimes. With it in place, you'll need to hold it with one finger to keep the spring loaded, and then replace the screw. Now I can go ahead and replace the gasket, then the diaphragm with the metal portion down, and last the cover. And I'll secure this with the 2 screws. Now I can go ahead and replace our rebuilt carburetor onto the blower. I'll start with the throttle cable. Next, the fuel lines. Now install the air filter base to the carburetor. I'll reinstall the gaskets. If your gaskets get torn, you'll want to replace them. And now the whole assembly threads back onto the engine. And the last bit of maintenance you'll want to perform is to install a new air filter. So as you can see, doing your own maintenance on your handheld blower is really very easy to do, and this can save you hundreds of dollars at a repair shop. If you found this video helpful, please feel free to leave a comment or ask us a question.